I hope I'm audible at the back. Yeah, we promise you no numbers. And I think from yesterday, everyone has been already establishing why we need to be mobile, why we need to be really finding ways to make this happen in a customized fashion, as opposed to we use it as a device. Yeah? And what we are going to be talking about in our piece is really about we need to think about more than A, the device, and B, our research requirements. What about consumers? What about how they feel? And what about the stimulus that we put into them? Yeah? So we're going to be talking you through how to make it a little more real life for them and a little more fun, possibly, for them. So we've called this piece co-opting consumers and technology for two things: to mimic real life scenarios because that makes them real, and B, because it makes them seem much more natural and longitudinal than they otherwise will be. Yeah? I'm pointing, and at him. Yeah, okay. Go back. Okay, now we're talking about the first piece that I'm going to talk about is about adapting ethnography, and really about what we call mobile ethnography. Now, it's the same principle. Ethnography has been around for ages. Ethnography itself comes from a discipline, if you know, called anthropology, and it's participant observation. But the principle with which ethnography began was really about observing people who are not like us. So it's literally, quote unquote, guinea pig consumers, right? So you look at people and you say, oh, that's strange and that's interesting and that's terrifying, and I wonder what it's all about. So it began in a scenario called participant observation, which is great. But what that does is that we immediately start treating consumers as passive objects. Yeah, so they are experimental cases, and we look upon them as passive pieces who are there to answer our questions, okay? Then we are physically present there, and that itself alters and intrudes onto their reality. And finally, after having all this, after having a huge camera in the room, after being there, in their space, we tell them, just pretend I'm not there, I'm invisible, just go on doing whatever it is that you are doing. Now, in doing so, I think that's just sleight of hand and that makes us feel better. But honestly speaking, ethnography itself was fairly intrusive. Now, on top of that, this is now mobile ethnography. So how do the rules of the game change? So really, we think that moving forward, what will need to happen is, we're not talking about research to consumers, doing things to consumers with our stimulus. It's really about working through consumers. And that's about informed consent, that's about co-opting, that's actually leveling with them at the very start about all the things that I really want you to do for me. And maybe we sacrifice a lot of width for a lot of depth, and that would work far better than what we're trying to do otherwise. So it's about people and their environment. It's about observation, ad hoc and crowdsourcing, and therefore now you're going to work with people in their own environment. You're going to work in an iterative fashion, and you're going to have a structured and longitudinal approach. With the mobile, and you would have seen it so many times during the day yourself, what you tend to do is that it never goes away from you. So you're at work, you're at home, you're at play, you're in commute, you're switching frames, so to speak. The mobile is with you throughout, and what you do is you use the mobile perhaps consciously, very subconsciously as well, to just switch between frames. So what you do is it's no longer taboo for people to look at Facebook or Snapchat or WeChat or whatever they do during work. It's just that you do a quick check on the status update and the headlines, and then you go back to your work. And so also at home, you quickly check what's on your work email, and then you go back to what you do. Now, the principle of mobile ethnography, next slide, has to leverage that. So really, the ethnographic principle is frequent but longitudinal. It's no longer those masses of videos of 8 hours, 10 hours, 14 hours that I take. And really, as researchers, it's extremely hard to even analyze, absorb, and make patterns out of those. And the mobile, therefore, is much more suited to ethnographic observations, which are about patterns of frequently done things, sometimes even reflexively or daily, and capturing that over a period of time. So what you have to do, just go back a second, is there has to be absolute willingness to collaborate. You have to co-opt them. They're actually your partners in that entire process. If it has to be real, and if they have to do it the way you want it done, and basically you need to co-opt those, okay? And you really need to tell them about their collective power to influence innovation in order to make that happen truthfully, yeah? And therefore, there are two parallel trends. Technology is becoming all-pervasive, and yet on the other hand, consumers are fiercely wanting to guard their privacy. Then what explains the amount of personal information that we put out on Facebook and other such places for strangers to read? What explains all the selfies that we take and not only let our friends see, but hundreds of other people seeing? So there's a corresponding and sort of oxymoronic need to be anonymous and to be famous at the same time. And when we use anything to do with a smartphone, you'll have to marry those two things quite intelligently, that A, you're not intruding, but B, I'm empowering. So you want to be let in, you have to be let in by people's rules. Next slide, please. So after all this, we collect these masses of videos, and the question that we get asked most often is, great, you've got lots of videos. So what do I do with these videos? What is it that you're going to do? So I think the next piece is really that we need to get much harder about the questions that we ask from those videos. And we can actually get hard, sharp answers if we ran ethnography to a very sharp brief. So the way we treat it, at least in Brandscapes, is we think that wherever there is regime, wherever there are rituals, wherever there is repetitive behavior, sometimes spontaneous, sometimes planned, sometimes impulsive, wherever there are product aspects of utilization, that's where mobile ethnography can actually play to its strengths. Yeah? So what we do is collect all that visual data. We literally do a frame-by-frame analysis. So because there is so much of marrying of the qualitative and quantitative, what we actually do with that is almost run a quantitative analysis of that videography. Yeah? And just to give you some example of that, before that, what this means as a principle is you've got to democratize the data collection system. If you're going to go forward on mobile or online or any such methodology, they're in charge, you're not. So you need to co-opt them. You need to make them aware of the fact that that's a huge privilege as well as a responsibility, but you do need to let go of control. And as we know as researchers in this room, that's a terrifying thought. But we do have to democratize this. We have to treat them like adults. We have been fairly patriarchal in researching people, yeah, with strong rules and hierarchy and definitions. What we can do, and this was a skin project that we ran. We've run it in Thailand, Korea, and many other places thereof. What it can actually give you as a mobile ethnography piece, which is just very simply that every time the person uses a product, they shoot a selfie-style video. They have the option to speak. They have the option to write down comments if they want to. We also have the option to go back to them after, not during. So this is completely, you're in charge of how you will, and we give them, what we didn't realize in the beginning was that we have to give them support. For example, if I'm applying a cleanser, then how do I actually shoot a video? Because my hand is not free. And if I start applying with one hand, is that the way I do it normally? So then we started giving people mounts and rests and selfie sticks and asked them how they would like to do that. So you do not alter the behavior because you're using technology. Yeah? So what you can actually do, go back, is calculate the number of steps. And most people are not aware of it. But for example, if you look at this, I don't know if you can see at the back, but applying a toner takes it has 17 steps, but it takes about 18 seconds. Yeah? But an eye cream has, 9 steps, but people take 18 seconds applying it. So the amount of involvement that there is with the product, the sequence which they follow, how it is different by day part, in the morning and the evening in the regime, it's all very clear to you, just basis the data. Yeah? Okay. Then we can work off the back of this on further, next slide, further insights. For example, if you asked a simple question, just every time they're applying a product, how are you feeling right now? What is running through your mind? If your skin could speak to you right now, what would it say? You'd actually be able to just map occasion analysis, mood analysis. So you'll be surprised that the same product during the morning and the night evokes quite different emotional sets. So if I'm using a moisturizing product in the morning, I'm actually using it as a canvas to prepare me for the rest of the day. So I'm just go, go, go. But in the night, if I'm using an anti-aging product, I'm actually investing in nourishing my skin, and that's quite a different. It's almost like a wind down kind of a ritual, yeah? So what we were able to do is therefore that you take all these particular products and you sharpshoot distinctly on usage occasions. You can also map the emotional benefits, and some of them will be overlapping and some not. So what we break this down into is a series of frames. And the frame will be accompanied by the steps, yeah? And what we found very fascinating in this particular market was consumers were actually mimicking what they've seen in beauty salons. So the belief system we understood at the end of the day in these countries was that however brilliant a product is, you've got to actually work hard to release the actives in the product. So they were practicing some very extreme form of tough love, which we were very, very frightened by, because they were slapping their faces and dabbing and massaging and doing all kinds of things with it. Where had they picked that up from? From salons, from beauty parlors, from what they see on videos, from what they see on YouTube. And there were two types of patterns. Sometimes they were buying cheaper products and compensating through this method to actually make it feel special. And sometimes they were buying an extremely expensive product and trying to maximize that effect, yeah? So this, like I said, was what we saw on the video, which we said was, is that tough love or is that tough love? So different patterns of using entirely the same product, yeah? So one of the insights we realized, which we would not have understood if it was not ethnography frame by frame, is the number of steps actually indicate the degree of involvement. Yeah, so we are able to map that out fairly clearly. And what it also tells you is the context of use, yeah? So how, for example, when I start using a product, is the ritual built? 4 months down the line, 6 months down the line, do I cut down on the number of steps? Or because I'm highly involved with certain steps, I still hold on to those and cut off the intermediaries. Or I am a repertoire product user and they have sort of overlapping benefits. So the first one in the sequence and the last one in the sequence have maximum amount of time. And the ones in between, you can actually do them in a very cursory sort of a way in a regime. So questions like that. So the kind of questions that mobile ethnography is designed to answer when you do it sharply is, how is my product actually consumed? Is the same product consumed by different family members? And if so, how? Yeah? My packaging. Does that packaging help or hinder? We found people struggling to actually take stuff out of certain. So half the time was spent on actually getting the product out, for example. Or what are the aha moments? What are the oops moments? Every brand manager believes that the product and the packaging has certain USPs. Does the product in use actually deliver on those? Do the sensorials come through? Do they reach packaging instructions? Do they completely ignore them? Things like that, yeah? So I'll hand over to Jayant now to talk to you about another example of where we use the entire principle of actually using stimulus, which is more real life. Jayant.
Thank you. Am I audible? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to talk about another piece of technology that is very useful in improving the quality of stimulus that we use, especially in the context of design, development, and testing. Now, in the context of retailing is fast evolving, and there are new formats that are emerging. The categories are expanding. There are new variants, new flavors, new kind of products that are entering the market, and of course, there's therefore a lot of pressure on the retailer as well as the marketer, and in managing the space, managing the planogram, breaking through clutter, and all of those challenges. So of course, all marketers want to attract shoppers. point of sale is extremely important. That's where bulk of the decisions are happening. I mean, you've spent a lot of money in brand building and in communication and advertising, and you don't want to miss out on the last mile. You want to look your best at the store as well. But what do we have in terms of tools and methodologies, or how do we make sure that your brand or your pack or your design is looking the best in the store? So some of the questions that the marketers are asking are how is my packaging performing? Am I looking good in store? Am I optimizing my POS materials? Is there an ROI on my investment in my in-store spends? So for these, simply researching shoppers will not be very helpful. I mean, that doesn't really involve winning the shopper. So it's not enough that we know that what shoppers are doing. We also need to learn how can we influence them in store. There are a lot of many general guidelines, especially in the development of visual merchandising and packaging. I said, even in the store, they shop from left to right, eye level, top down, the golden triangle. There are a lot of such general rules on how you manage visual merchandising in store, but really there is not enough insights that can tell you what you need to do in your store to do better. There are many methodologies. There are no shortage of methodologies or expertise. There are very good analytical tools as well. But unfortunately, these tools are being run on substandard stimulus. So it's like having a Ferrari and not a good road to run, you ride your Ferrari on. There are a lot of tools, such as static shelf test, where you have a computer screen with a few packs shown, and that's your clutter test. It's good, but it's not really the way shoppers really shop. There's some other new sophisticated techniques where the shoppers are all wired in and neuro testing, and they almost feel awkward, and it's as if they're in some science lab or some guinea pig of sorts. So really the importance of stimulus here. So this is an example of, a lot of popular tools that we have. For example, T-scope is where a shelf is shown for a controlled period of time. Findability tests which assume that you know what you're searching for. And recall questions, these are good for ad testing, but really in a retail store, the marketer wants to see your pack in the basket and not being recalled on shelf, really, isn't it? Eye tracking is a very promising tool. It overcomes some of the challenges that T-scope and other methodologies bring in. But really, again, the challenge of having stimulus. So I think it's time that we look at how we can develop better quality of stimulus, better quality of input, so that we can make the best use of methodologies and analytical tools for good quality of output. So we really shouldn't forget putting shoppers or consumers in the center, and because if we don't research them in the right environment, if we don't mimic their natural environment, there's no point in studying about their behavior, in such artificial or a departed kind of an environment. So, as practitioners, we thought let's take this into our own hands and really let's create some. Let's look at what is available in terms of technology today and see if we can dramatically impact the quality of stimulus. Now, I'm going to walk to the back of the screen. I'm going to present from the back. This is not theatrics. It's just to control the laptop. This is what we developed for our stimulus testing, in-store stimulus testing. And this is a virtual reality platform. Really believe that virtual reality can play a very important role in redefining the way we develop and use stimulus today. So this is a live demonstration of a store that we built together for in packaging and POSM testing. So you can see, just like a video game, I can move through the store. You can see all the products quite clearly. If you go near, you can see clear what you're looking at. You can choose from. I think what's important is also we are able to develop scenarios for design testing. So because without scenarios, we don't know how we can influence a shopper behavior. So what if I put a gondola here? Or what if I change some of the POS there, on the background? Which kind of design works better in attracting shoppers? So this is quite a dynamic environment where the shoppers, what we do is we give a joystick and a kind of a rod to the joystick which mimics a shopping cart, and any shopper feels pretty natural in pushing and pulling the cart, and that's how they move through this environment. So if I try and choose, click on this bottle, I can actually just turn it around and pick it up and basket it just like the way you would normally do. So what we have done is we have also overlaid this with eye tracking, so that when we test these designs in a virtual environment integrated with eye tracking, we exactly know how the shopper is shopping in this environment and how they are moving through the aisles, and how are they evaluating, are they noticing our designs, are they picking up what aspects of our of the packaging are they looking at. So we can really set up different kinds of scenarios and design scenarios to see what can influence a shopper better. So it's not just in modern trade. We also can build these VR environments on traditional trade as well. And this is not just in the context of retail as well. This is also in the context of any kind of stimulus that involves some amount of design testing. Yesterday, we also talked a lot about, we saw a lot of presentations about in-store attraction and how to engage shoppers in-store. I think this is an excellent tool where you can, engage the shopper or draw the shopper into the store as well. So it is really quite mobile. It can be deployed anywhere in the world. This you can do it on a screen. All you need is a TV screen and an eye tracker. So anywhere in the world as a central location test for quant. It really allows the researcher to be his true self, which is, after all, researchers are, are someone, we need to experiment to come out with insights. So it helps us develop scenarios without having to worry about permissions, store permission, physical permissions, and all those huge amount of cost involved. And it's also, we all know that in designs, especially in the retail, we know edges, or movements or color contracts or faces. Broadly, these are things that draw attention, but really to see how these come into play in a given scenario to influence shoppers, and how do they influence purchase is the more interesting thing that we get to see here. This is just sample output on how we can use the data. Therefore, both quant and qualitative methodologies can be then used. Then you can really unleash any kind of an analytical tool over the stimulus because what you're getting is a very close to real life experience for the shoppers. So it's time to relook at how we deploy our stimulus and really try and keep it close to and natural for the shoppers. And also, it's a technology that puts consumers at ease and not really complicate or make them awkward. It's a dynamic platform that allows iterations. You can set up different, so you know what is not working. The next second, with the press of a button, you can change the scenario. So, all right, let's see how the shoppers change or behave differently in this manner. So you can really quickly and very efficiently set up scenarios to arrive at the best optimum design. And this is mobile. We know, 2015 has been a great year for virtual reality. And I'm sure you're aware of most of the Samsung S6, S7s are virtual reality platforms in themselves. And and the way they're being commercialized today, I think virtual reality is going to be, the next everyday gadgets. And I'm sure, by the next conference, probably a lot of them will have brought virtual reality machines into this room today. So, so that's the case on, so time to think about mobile as not just mobile phone, but it's really about what else you can do with this device in terms of stimulus. Thank you so much.
Great talk. Is there any questions? George.
Thank you for your great presentation. I was just wondering if you have tried simulating the effect of traffic flow in your various store formats. I mean, the different designs, my intuition would be that different designs facilitate, the smooth, flow of human traffic differently.
Yeah, we would love to do that. That we have to co-opt permissions. So I think the only, when we create the scenarios, they can completely be done by any of us in this room because we can create those. When you have to track the traffic, you do need permissions in terms of that. But I think that, it is developmental work. But I think it is a great way of moving it forward because your action orientation will really be, if I change the scenario, will it affect the traffic? Will it affect eyeballs? Will it affect? And I'm sure that can be applied to websites and web pages and so on. It's not just over here that's happening. I'm sure it can be tied up in the online world. That seems to be an easier thing to do.
So
in the physical world, there are permissions and there are different entities who need to be sort of brought together for that to happen. But really, that's what will move. I think there was an earlier presentation that talked about the merchandisers and the e-tailers and the manufacturers coming together. I think it's quite similar to that. If we hold on to it in a very, because to the consumer, you're one. But if you hold on to it from a very manufacturer or a practitioner perspective, it will be hard to break that down.
It's an excellent tool to sit together for a retailer and the manufacturer to see what's working for both. And, of course, both manufacturer and retailer both have agendas. And to your answer, a lot of these could be, VR can be used in the developmental stage. So finally, when you have a scenario, of course, you can do a test store to validate it, which gives you more traffic. But when you're in the developmental stage to test out different scenarios and arrive at which one has the most potential, and this is where it works best.
In fact, we worked on a project recently, which was actually about scenarios 3 years down. So they were planning phase changes to the packaging 4 years down the line. And it's a little difficult to guess what the competition set will be, but with varying scenarios, you could actually predict what sequence you should actually go on this packaging to morph it into the next one. So you can actually do that quite well.
Great. Right up the back here.
Hi, I'm Johnson from Malaysia. I'm quite impressed with the 3D thing earlier. Have you done a real case study between after you have tested in the 3D virtual world versus the real actual supermarket or hypermarket, and what's the results? Thank you.
We have done a lot of studies through virtual reality, and we are kind of convinced on how it can mimic real store. But having said that, yes, virtual reality is not a replacement for the real world, but it's to see without having to go to the real world, if we can quickly set up certain scenarios and test it out, which is the most effective ones. So the good thing about virtual reality is what I can say with confidence is that when we give that stuff in a joystick with trolley, which makes a trolley, and shopper shops it, they really get engaged and behave as though they're in the real store. And we have to tell them, okay, stop, you don't have to shop all the categories. Oh, but I always go there, that's the next. So the kind of involvement you see is very clearly, it's evident that they feel like they're in a real store. So that gives us a confidence that it's not a static shelf flash or some kind of artificial setting where we're creating and testing the packs. It's really so they are in control of how they discover their design and pack, and we are not controlling any exposure so that we can measure accurately.